Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you taking some time out today. We've been doing a series of webinars for quite some time, and I've lost count, honestly. I think we're at 16, 17, or 18. I cannot tell you for this year, and this is the last one of this year. We get into the holidays, and there's no reason to do any more. But this one's going to be really cool because I have an incredible expert on the line with me today who is going to help us out. Matthew Fanning comes from Check Point. And I'm going to let him talk about himself and a little bit about the company. Matt, you want to take just a minute or two and kind of explain who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Matt Fanning. I am a MSSP security engineer here with Check Point. I work with our MSSP team to work with our partners, their customers, whatever they need technically. Background-wise, I spent most of my career in the MSP world. I ran my own MSP for about 6 years. I've worked for other MSPs, and so it's kind of a niche for me. I am very passionate about cybersecurity. I've been with Check Point for about a year and a half, and love everything I do here.
That's awesome. And Matt and I had a chance to talk. The format for today is going to be really cool because we really don't have an agenda. We sat down and talked for about an hour just on the latest security information. And then I told Matt, I'm just going to start asking you questions, and we're going to pick your brain. And more importantly, we're going to open this up so that everyone who's attending can ask questions. So you have a chance to ask your best, toughest security questions. That's why we have Matt on the line. He's going to talk. He's going to demo. He's going to talk about security just in general, and he's hopefully going to show us some cool stuff that Check Point's got going. I want to make sure we can sneak in as many demos as we can. He's agreed to do that for us. And I'll just say, Matt and I had a blast. We just started talking, and it got really fun. And I imagine if we have the same kind of conversation today, that'll be the case. I should introduce myself. I am Mike O'Neill. I work for Fuji. I came from a 20-year career at Microsoft. Not quite 20 years, just shy of 20 years. And I'm in charge of really technical evangelism here at Fuji. Fuji is a worldwide corporation. We're based and headquartered in the United States, so we're a U.S. company, but we have offshore in Costa Rica or nearshore in Costa Rica, and that's where our security operations center is. And that keeps us on the same time zone as the U.S. And then we also have a offshore group in India, and you can see some of the numbers here, lots and lots of people and professionals and certifications. We do basically three things. We do technical staffing. We have a long history of that. We do training on all kinds of amazing technology. And we have a consulting services. And the consulting services really broken down into these four areas, and that's it. We do cloud migrations. We do data and analytics. We obviously do security. That's what we're going to be focused on today. And we do product engineering, quality engineering, low code, no code, meaning we build business process automation stuff. And we have quite a number of customers right now that are building solutions with that. And I did not want this to sound like a commercial, and so we're going to say that's it for my slides, and we're going to dive in and talk just in general about security. Now, again, I want as many questions from the audience as possible. You have a tool in front of you, and you should be able to open up a questions window, and if you do, we'll see them pop in on our screen. And I'll be monitoring it, and hopefully I've said Deep on the line, he'll be monitoring it, and as questions come in, we'll be glad to take those live, because that's really the whole kind of point of this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We'll start talking, and then Matt, if you want to do a demo or you want to show something, just let Sandeep know. He can convert it over.
Sure.
I hit the right buttons there. I should be stopping sharing my screen. That should be good. Okay, so let's just dive in because we have so much to talk about. One of the things I want to talk about is just in the news. Matt and I discussed this, and I hate using fear factor with security, right? You're going to get hacked, and you should do this, and blah, blah, blah. I just don't like it. I'd rather come from a proactive, positive stance. But that being the case, man, there's a lot of news lately about major corporations that have gone through this and are not having a good day. The one that I really on my mind, MGM Resorts, whoever is brave enough to go after the casinos in Vegas, man, that is surprising because I wouldn't do that on a dare.
That
go ahead.
specific group, the FBI actually put out a warning recently. That specific group, they're tracked by a few different names. I call them Scattered Spider just because I think that's the catchiest one. Octo Tempest is another one. But they're a really unique group. The FBI put out a warning recently that they are specifically going after the gaming industry, the casino industry.
Wow.
You and me out here gaming, I think something else. But yeah, the FBI because MGM was the biggest one, but prior to that, they actually also breached Caesars. And we only found out about that because of an 8K filing with the SEC.
And these casinos, they have put a lot into security, obviously, right? So how in the world did these highly secure organizations get breached? Do you know any kind of details? Can you share any?
Yeah, actually, Microsoft just put out a threat intelligence podcast about this, where they interviewed a couple of the Microsoft folks that had access to, were able to actually listen into some of these phone calls. They're primarily relying on social engineering. They call up the help desk and either pose as a user, usually an IT user that's going to have a little bit more privileged access than a regular user. But they'll call up posing as that individual, say, hey, I lost my phone, I lost my laptop, I need access to my work stuff. They light a fire of urgency. You know, I've got my boss and his boss are waiting on me to give this presentation. I need to get in right now. But Microsoft actually had access to some of the calls. And, you know, you think about MGM, you think about Caesars, you think they're going to have very mature security operations. So this is going to be like an Ocean's 11 style heist, right?
Right.
So they were North American, native English speakers, best they can tell, on the line. They were faking foreign accents. At one point they said, hey, we need your social security number to verify that you're actually this person. And the threat actor on the phone said, hold on one second. There was a full minute of silence on the line before the threat actor came back. He provided the correct social security number, but obviously there were a lot of red flags being thrown up.
Yeah, why wouldn't you know that off the top of your head, right?
Exactly. And in that podcast, they actually said that the majority of these calls, these social engineering calls that they made, were unsuccessful because the policies and procedures in place were followed. The cases where they actually did get in and get access, a lot of times that was a help desk person trying to be helpful. It was, you know, they were trying to go out of their way and maybe bend a policy here or break a procedure here because this person, you know, their boss's boss has this presentation that they've got to do. And it's that sense of urgency. But
this is the scariest part to me because you can do so much to lock up your network, but if your people aren't trained or if out of pity they break the rules, you're screwed. And I'm sure it costs the casinos ridiculous amounts of money. How much is computer security training as important as actually all the firewalls and all the you know, systems you put in place?
Absolutely.
I would imagine that's huge.
Yeah, they were. I think the estimate was they were losing $100 million a day every day that they were down. That's at least what they're reporting to their insurance company. But, you know, with the gaming industry, they can quantify losses down to the second, put a numeric value on that. And you're absolutely correct. Training individuals against social engineering attacks like that and putting those policies and procedures in place and actually following them.
Yeah, I came from the Microsoft world, obviously, and I know Microsoft does this. I'm pretty sure Check Point does this too, where you can send a test email that tries to spoof your users. Do you guys have that capability?
So we don't have that capability natively. We partner with InfoSec Institute, where we do have that option there. But absolutely, that is a huge area that has to be addressed. Is that proactive security training?
When you talk to customers, how do you address the training part of it in general?
Well, like you mentioned, tools can only go so far. You know, sometimes there's a disconnect between the seat and the keyboard. That's where your biggest security flaw can be in some cases. And really training those people and investing in the right training, because you know enough about psychology. You really have to gamify a lot of this. You have to keep people interested. If it's just a compliance checkbox, it's completely useless. It's providing no value to your users.
Right. We talked about, the number one thing that every customer needs to do that will really help in the security is turn on multi-factor authentication. Turn on the fact that when you log in, it's going to double check with another device or another set to make sure you are who you are. In these cases, like in the Vegas case, even with MFA turned on, it really didn't matter, right? It bypassed a lot of this because someone didn't follow the rules.
It did, and honestly, MFA is really it's going from more of a hard wall to a speed bump. There's a lot of phishing as a service offerings out there in the criminal to criminal marketplace right now that will actually, they have ways to bypass it. What they can do is proxy that connection. So you're actually logging into a Microsoft portal, but they are capturing that cookie information and those credentials in that handshake. So they can bypass MFA. Threat actors are getting better and better at that, especially, like I said, as we see the proliferation of these phishing kits, as these phishing as a service offerings.
Right. Is the answer biometrics? I know we were talking about Apple. Apple does a really good job with iPhone and, detecting that you are who you are using your biometrics, whether it's a face scan or whatnot. And I know even Microsoft just talked about these scanners, these cameras are so good, they can actually not only, 3D contour your face to make sure it's you, but they can actually see your blood flowing under your skin, right? So it's not just a cardboard cutout of yourself. But is that what you're seeing in the industry? Is a lot of these companies are looking at biometrics as a way to add that additional security, or no?
Well, a lot of times it's definitely you have to have that second factor. Biometrics are good. Biometrics can be spoofed in some cases. Some with very low level stuff. Some of the early thumb scanners for the iPhones, you could spoof those with just a wax cutout of your finger. Anything that had those 3D contours. But what we're seeing a lot of is as that second factor, something like an actual hardware key, an actual device that you have.
Right.
That seems to be gaining a lot more traction.
Wow, that's amazing. That's absolutely crazy. And I was thinking, I see Tom Cruise use that finger trick every time on every Mission Impossible movie. I always thought that was not the case. So one of the well, let's just jump into this because this is probably, I think, the most important thing. I'm a new chief information officer. I'm a new security officer. I've just come to a new company. I don't really know the background, the history. What should I be doing to secure my entire organization? This is so big of a deal. It's kind of hard to get your teeth into it, know where to start. So where do you recommend people start when they're trying to look at their entire organization top to bottom and figure out the best way to get it all secured?
So that's the very first part is visibility. You have to know what is out there in the world, in your environment, both from a security standpoint, where to map out where your potential vulnerabilities are, but also from it just knowing your assets, knowing what the company has, what the company is responsible for. Gaining visibility, you can do, you've got multiple fronts on that. With something like cloud, we've got our CSPM tool, our Cloud Security Posture Management. We can go out there and gain visibility, look at all your assets across your multi-cloud environment. So we can onboard like a Google Cloud and AWS and Azure Cloud, and we can enumerate all of those different assets throughout your cloud environment. Similar with email, we can do that with your email environment and your on-prem network. Those are the things that I definitely recommend as that first step. You've got to gain visibility. You've got to see what's on the network. From there, it's really a triaging what's going on. One of our tools that I love for that is our posture management that's included, or that's an add-on for our endpoint product. So you put our EDR product out there in your environment, it's out there protecting you. We can also go through and look at all of the patching for all of your servers, workstations, everything. We can see what's vulnerable and also where those fall on the scale. So that gives us the ability to determine, to triage what's the most where am I going to get the most bang for my buck in terms of mitigating risk, but also being cost effective?
Right.
So really triaging out those items once you gain visibility, once you've got a full understanding of what's going on, then you can triage those problems and work through that.
I made sure when I send out the invites for this, I wanted people to know this isn't a sales event, right? We want to talk technology and whatnot. So this is going to sound like a shameless plug, and I don't mean it to be a shameless plug. But I know one of the things that Checkpoint and Fuji have been doing is offering these complimentary kind of security assessments, workshops where you sit down. Is that what you're talking about when you say go out and kind of pull these devices, or is that something
Absolutely. Different? So we've actually got two different things that we can do. We have what we call a security operations review. That's a little bit lower touch. What we do there is we work with someone like myself, a security engineer, as well as a security architect. We bring in our security architect and we look at everything that you've got in your environment. We sit down and have conversations with you about where you think your gaps are, where you think your vulnerabilities might lie, and then we do a full assessment. We look at your cloud stuff with that cloud security posture management I talked about. We look at your email environment because email is, it represents the largest attack surface for any organization. It's out there publicly to the world 24/7, 365. So we get an assessment on that. And then also with your on-prem network, we can go in and put in a device that sits passively and looks at all that traffic. From that, what we can do is generate, can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh.
There we go.
Okay, perfect. So this is a security workshop. Actually, we were talking about security operations review first. So this is a security operations review output. This would actually be the deliverable document that we would give to the partner, to the customer when we got done with that. As you can see here, we've got executive summary, and then we've got executive recommendations. The executive summary, exactly what it sounds like. We're going to go over kind of an assessment, the top level, high level stuff of what's going on in the environment, as well as kind of some goals. Improve operational efficiency, lower total cost of ownership, and align with Checkpoint's configuration and operational best practices. From there, you can see we lay out all of these different items and where they sit at their current rating. We rate from 0 to 3, with 0 being does not apply, 1 does not exist, exists but only partially effective, and then effective and meets strategic goals. So what we do is we give this deliverable to you. We have about anywhere from a 2 to 3 hour conversation where we go through this line by line and talk about what we can do. From a more in-depth standpoint, we have these security workshops. This is actually going to be in-depth, really in-depth. We can go on site and actually have an engineer out there to collect data during the initial period. And then when we do the meeting, it's usually a 1 to 2 day meeting where we sit down with all the relevant stakeholders and we talk about what's in the environment right now, what we need to do to improve that security posture, and the ways and methods that we can utilize to go about that.
Two points I want to make on this, or I want to ask a question about. Some people know my background. I worked at Microsoft for a really long time, and for 12 years I ran the seminar division, and we had a very successful training organization that went out and taught everything from Windows Server to SQL Server to Office. And inevitably, we would do phenomenal. We'd have 500 plus people attend an event. Microsoft got really excited because we were getting these great results and asked us to do security events. And all of a sudden, the attendance would drop by a fourth. It would just go to nothing. So instead of 500, we'd be lucky if we could get 100 in there. And the same thing holds true on these kind of assessments. I'm always amazed because I don't call these free assessments, by the way. You and I haven't talked about this, but I tend to call them complimentary assessments. And I'll explain why in a second. But what happens is I'm amazed at the number of customers who don't take up this offer, right? And the reason I call them complimentary is I think it's step one of a 5-6 step process to get customers into it, to understand kind of what you were talking about, get their feet wet and understand what they're facing. The idea is Checkpoint and Fuji are like, we'll cover the cost of that first one, right? We'll get you in. And the most important part of this is no obligation. If you look at it and you say, okay, this isn't for me, it's not a high pressure sales, we're not going to hound you, all that stuff. I'm just really surprised more customers aren't taking advantage of this. And you and I just talked, Fuji just did this with Checkpoint for a customer. The customer went with the review and found amazing amounts of problems that they had, but using consulting realized they could actually fix a lot of it themselves, and they decided not to move forward. That's okay. There's no problem with just using the complimentary review. At least you'll know kind of what you're getting into. I don't know your thoughts on that and how often.
I am in complete agreement, and I will say with the security workshop, when it comes out, it's not, hey, here's your problem, buy this Checkpoint product to solve your problem.
Yeah.
This is generalized. I won't go as far as saying it's vendor agnostic because our logo will be on it, but we're not saying you need to buy this specific model. We're saying these are the areas that you're deficient. Here's how you can improve those deficiencies. And yes, you can utilize Checkpoint products and services in that, but like you said, there's no obligation, there's no requirement.
Yeah. And there's no pressure. That's the big part.
Exactly.
I want people to realize we're not going to hound you and dog you and do that. But we do want you to understand what you're facing. I think, too, the number of times customers go through this thinking, oh, I'm going to see these problems, and instead see a much bigger kind of issue that they didn't realize, was there. The other factor of this is I think customers will think, oh, they're going to turn on every possible thing, and they're going to show me a big laundry list of issues that I have. And one of the things I love about Checkpoint is you have the ability to filter stuff. Stuff that is not critical, high-level importance, you can actually take out of the list. Am I speaking out of turn? Or,
no.
That's
so
one of the things I think is really cool.
Yes, I think you're specifically talking about with our CSPM product. If you've got specific, and what the CSPM product is doing is you onboard your cloud environment, and it is looking at that, looking at all your controls within that environment. You can run all those controls against various compliance regimes. So PCI DSS 4.0, that's a relatively new standard. So you can go out and run that assessment and say, where am I deficient on PCI compliance within my cloud environment? Well, there are some things that, yeah, it's out of compliance, but it's out of compliance for a valid reason, and it's not actually out of compliance. You can go through there and make exclusions. You can say, yes, I know, but.
Right. And I think that's important is that and this false flag concept where, stuff that is not really an issue. You don't want to pull in all the reports and log files and everything with a bunch of garbage that kind of hides the real security issues that I think you might have within your organization.
Absolutely, and that's another great thing about those assessments is that we can go down even with the security operations review, which is the light version. That's still at least a 2.5-hour meeting where we are sitting down and talking through all of these things, answering questions, going line by line, and showing you, these are the things that are out of compliance, and here's why that is potentially catastrophic.
Yeah.
Or
why do customers resist these, I guess, is the question I have. I don't know if there's a good answer or not, but I think there is some resistance. If I had a chance to at least know what potential problems I may face, I would jump at it. But again, the statistics show that most companies just kind of want to bury their head in the sand. I think you and I were talking about those days are kind of gone. You used to think, if I'm protecting my house, I put up a light outdoors that's got motion sensor, and if I can make my house a little less inviting to criminals, they're going to go to my neighbor. That used to be the way security worked, but not anymore. Can you talk about that a little bit?
It's actually interesting you bring that up. There was a story that came out today of the ALF-V ransomware group. Traditionally, the threat from ransomware, obviously, the first threat is the business disruption. If you can't get access to your network, that's a really bad thing to your data. The second threat was from extortion. They would exfiltrate your data and then lock up your system. So they would make you pay the ransom to get access to your own data, and then they would make you pay a second ransom so that they didn't expose your data out there to the internet. Mm-hmm. Well, now there's a new third threat. The ALF-V ransomware group actually reported a company to the SEC because they did not file an 8K about the breach that they had. So the threat actors who broke into the network filed a complaint with the American SEC against this company, against their victim, for not reporting that specific breach.
That is harsh.
Yeah.
You and I, too, live in Dallas, and I know Dallas has made the news. You know, not only did the city services get hit, I think a bunch of the schools got hit, and not only once, but twice from completely different attacks.
That was, and completely different ransomware groups as well. That first attack was a full-on ransomware attack. It disrupted city services across the board. That took them a solid 2 weeks to fully get back up and recovered. Well, to get semi-functional, it took them 2 weeks. Then probably 2 months later, you're absolutely right. The Conti ransomware group came in and hit, or excuse me, okay, I forget which one hit them the second time. It was the Play ransomware group the first time. But yeah, the second time they exploited a different vulnerability. They were totally unrelated events. It was somebody came in the front door yesterday, and now they broke in the back door today.
Yeah, and I think the targets, you know, they used to not mess with a lot of different groups. So I think casinos was a great example, right? No one touched the casinos, but now everything that used to be untouchable seems to be a target nowadays. And these people are making billions, if not trillions of dollars in different ways. And I think it brings more people in who look for more potential attack victims, which pushes down even further into that median and even in some cases smaller businesses. So no one's really safe, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
No, and like you mentioned, most of these groups, these are not Ocean's 11, Jason Bourne, James Bond characters. They are predominantly going after the low-hanging fruit. People that have public face. I mean, the Citrix Bleed is a recent one. Citrix patched this specific vulnerability, I think, 4 months ago. But the ransomware groups keep claiming new targets every day, and not small ones. Lockheed Martin got hit with this vulnerability.
Yeah. And you brought this up. I thought this was absolutely fascinating, and I hadn't thought about it till our discussion, which is, and I know it's common sense, but you just don't think about it. All they care about is money. These aren't really the type of people that are trying to disrupt for the fun of disrupting. They're not trying evil intent or what. They are totally 100% financially motivated. That's the whole reason they're doing what they're doing.
Absolutely. And really, if you think back to targeting, if you are sitting on data that can be monetized, anything, and especially quickly monetized, I really love looking at that cash out chain. You know, if you are the criminal living in Eastern Europe, let's say, how are you going to get digital currency from your screen to cash in your hand? Mm-hmm. And those, I think that's a really good metric. How easily monetizable is your data? Because especially in extortion attacks, that's really where it is, because these guys are coin operated. They will attack hospitals, they will attack all sorts, anything that's going to make them a profit.
So two sides of this. One is the ransomware, right? We're going to lock your system and not give it back to you till you pay the ransom. Number two is we're going to leak all your private information. And,
yes.
This concept of it takes 20 years to build up a great reputation with your customer and about 10 seconds to lose it when all their data is suddenly posted out on the internet. So I assume that's the two main financial methods these people are going after?
Yeah, they're always innovating. Always, these organizations are run exactly like businesses. They have offices in Russia. They have technical support because they are building a reputation just like you and I are. They are building a reputation so that if you pay them, you will get your files unlocked. Right. So in order to do that, they stand up 24/7, 365 tech support. There's live chat with these ransomware groups that can be accessed any time of day. And they have structures where when you start chatting with that person, they'll say, hold on, I have to go get my boss. We're talking money now.
Wow.
So these are multi-tiered organizations that are run out there. They will absolutely pivot. Those are definitely the two main vectors that you're seeing right now. You're seeing ransomware and extortion kind of neck and neck. Sometimes you'll even see double dip attacks where they will drop the ransomware they'll extort the data or exfiltrate the data, hold on to that data, drop the ransomware. Once you pay that, then they hit you with the extortion on top of that.
Wow, yeah. I was going to say something, but I can't say that in a webinar. That's
it's
terrible.
Definitely, it's the easiest path to illicit revenue for them right now. Easiest and most profitable path.
I don't want to put you on the line, and you and I have not discussed this, so I want to be careful as I ask this, but I am curious, does Checkpoint have once you are ransom, once your network is encoded, your data is locked up, et cetera, there's not a lot anyone can do at that point, right? There's no magic key or...
So there's options. Actually, the FBI, when the FBI goes in and carries out offensive attacks, which is pretty rare, against these ransomware groups, one of the things they'll do is they'll remain stealthy, but they will steal those keys. And so let's say you're a business that gets hit. You wake up, you come into work Monday morning, everything's offline. The FBI gives you a call and says, hey, we know you just got hit, but here are the keys to unlock all of your data so you don't have to pay.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, there's stuff like that. In some cases, you're out of luck. You don't have the FBI hacking them back. You really don't have a ton of options. They are using very, very strong encryption as long as they don't make a mistake when they are designing their application, because we've seen that before too. We've seen exploits found in these ransomware applications that allow people to decrypt their data without having to pay the ransom.
Yeah, and I guess where I was going to this, and there's no good answer, I'm sure, but I'm a medium-sized business. I get attacked. I am now for ransom. Do I pay the ransom or do I not pay the ransom, right? And I've heard the don't encourage them if you don't pay. And then I also have to keep a living, and I have to pay my employees, and I have to do all this stuff. So I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer in that whole scenario.
So it's really going to depend. It's one of those it depends answers. I can tell you philosophically, I say never pay the ransom. Every ransom paid today funds an attack tomorrow. Right. These attacks, they require infrastructure. There's cost associated with setting up one of these attacks. And you are just funding the next one. Insurance companies have kind of wised up. They aren't paying claims near as much. They often bring in their own forensics company who will come in and collect forensics and be looking for a reason not to pay out that claim. Really, I have personally, in a previous role, not with Checkpoint, worked ransomware cases, some where they paid, some where they didn't. It depends on how critical that data is. If you can limp along without it, it's best not to pay. But the reality is, the last stat I saw was that 60% of small and medium businesses that were hit with ransomware did not recover. They closed their doors because of that attack. Do
you know what the average ransom price is? I know that's probably hard to say, but...
So I actually saw a report not that long ago. For Lockbit specifically, it was 1.4 million was the average ransom, and then for the Clop ransomware gang, it was 1.2. That's just the actual ransom that you're paying out. If you're that medium-sized business that's got their data encrypted that we were talking about, right, that's just what you're paying to the threat actor. According to IBM's cost of a data breach report, the last one they put out just a few months ago, the average cost of an incident, the total cost of the incident, was about 4.5 million.
Wow. And
that's per incident.
Not to belabor the obvious point, but setting up security is a fraction of that cost, right? So
that, and you get to do it on your own time schedule. You're not doing it at 10 p.m. on a Sunday night.
Yeah, that's a very good point, right? When they're forcing you to make those decisions. Yeah, no, I think, it just goes back to this. Whether you use Checkpoint, whether you use someone, an ounce of prevention now will just save you from that nightmare scenario later. One of the things I'm going to share, and by the way, I keep reminding people, ask your questions. If you have any questions, I'm kind of monitoring. I don't see any questions as of yet. But if you do have questions for Matt and Checkpoint, please make sure you type them in. Excuse me. One of the things I'm going to share with everyone, I wrote a technical white paper. I actually did a lot of kind of work on this, but I wanted people to understand that we did not arrive at the decision to partner with Checkpoint in a weekend, right? In our particular case, it took over a year of intensive study, test, everything before we determined which partner we were going to go with. And so I wrote a paper that kind of describes the process we went through and what we considered and why we eventually decided to go with Check Point. One of the biggest reasons, and I searched a lot of the forums for users to see what they were saying about Check Point in particular. Again, I'm not trying to make this a Check Point commercial, but I think this is a valid issue. They're talking about how great the user interface is, right? When you have a flood of data coming in from log files and from different information, Check Point has acquired a number of companies, and I list them in my document, and then pulled them all together kind of under what we would call a single pane of glass sort of thing. I wonder if you could show that or talk a little bit about the UI. I know I didn't give you a heads up that was coming.
No, I'm always prepared.
Okay.
This is Check Point's Infinity Portal. Like you talked about, this is a single pane of glass, multi-tenancy. That little drop down right there is my multi-tenancy. The screen I've got pulled up right here is our Horizon Events page. I love this specific page, page right here, because it shows all of our different devices and services and correlates all those logs and alerts into one centralized place. These two Quantum gateways and Quantum Spark, these are our hardware firewalls. We've got Harmony Endpoints, our EDR. We've got a mobile security solution. And then we've also got our email solution and our cloud solution that we can pull data in from and look at all of the logs correlated across all of the different devices. So we really take a holistic view of security.
Yeah. Well, I think the cool part for me is just a clean interface. If you're a security professional and you're having to look at these all day long, I've worked with a bunch. I've worked with we tested about 6 other ones, and you almost get dizzy at the end of the day because it's just too much information thrown at you in too random of fashion. And the one thing that kept coming up again and again and again about Check Point was how nicely organized and clean the interface was to be able to see stuff that normally would be buried in tons and tons of data. It seems to pop out a lot easier in this type of interface.
Absolutely, and you can see here I've just been switching between different products. This is our EDR solution, but I come from an engineering background, and I am so used to looking at multiple different portals, having 8 different tabs up for one client site. With this, I've got everything in one neat little package. If I want to switch between customers, I can just scroll through here, click the right one, and boom, I'm ready to go.
And right there on that screen, because this is the point that I'm trying to help customers with as we talk to them about security and we talk to them about Check Point. I mentioned Check Point has evolved just as the threats have evolved, right? And whether it becomes in the cloud or whether it's mobile devices or whatever, you keep adding more and more functionality and features to do it. And you have these kind of 4 buckets here: Horizon, Quantum, CloudGuard, and Harmony. Can you just kind of explain the 4 buckets and what each one is designed to do?
So we call these our 4 pillars. Starting off, we've got the Quantum pillar. This is going to be what most people know Check Point for. This is going to be our hardware firewalls, and right here we've got our Smart One Cloud. This would be for managing those enterprise-grade firewalls. We've got full cloud management there. Then we've got our Spark line. That's our smaller line, but that's traditionally our hardware, and it also includes our SD-WAN. And we mentioned acquisitions. Perimeter 81 was one of the latest acquisitions. We're going to be rolling that into what we call our Quantum SASE right there. CloudGuard, pretty self-explanatory. This is our entire CNAPP suite, our whole holistic cloud security solution. We've got a bunch of different components within that do a whole bunch of different cloud security things. And then Harmony is really about securing users and access. That's going to be our EDR product, our mobile threat defense product, and then our email security solution. Primarily are going to be the big components of Harmony. So like I said, that's really been that has mostly been around the evolution as we've seen the security architecture be a really high-walled castle. You invest a ton of money in the latest and greatest firewall. You build a nice big perimeter around your on-prem network, and nothing can get in. You don't have to worry about security inside because nobody can get inside. Well, the paradigm has really shifted as work from home became a thing, as, we're seeing more multiple locations, people working from the coffee shop. And so that's where Checkpoint kind of pivoted to focus on securing those users and their connections to and from that on-prem infrastructure. So that's why we have things like the email security, the endpoint security, and the mobile security. Especially on that mobile front, we're seeing so much more work being done on that mobile device.
Right. That makes sense.
And then Horizon is really our management end. You can see here we've got an MPR, MDR product. We use MDR, MPR interchangeably. Checkpoint focuses heavily on prevention over detection, so it's kind of a little wordplay there. MPR instead of MDR. But that's also where we have our XDR solution. That's going to be primarily targeted towards customers that have a SOC, and then the events page that I was talking about with all of the data in one centralized location.
That's excellent. I'm laughing because I'm sure people are thinking I'm just leading you through some kind of script, and I am not. I am throwing curveball at you left and right, so I appreciate it. He did not know I was asking for any of this stuff. One of the interesting things, and I'll give a slight, it's probably the only thing I'll give a knock to Checkpoint for, just from my own personal experience, is just there's so much trying to get your head around how all this stuff works. And I went through the experience not using the partner training. I tried to go through the typical end user experience, and I told you I kind of got lost. It's really interesting. So I have committed myself to go through kind of piece by piece and really dive in and write some blog articles and maybe even do some training. And you brought up something that was interesting. You were talking about how the training, like out on YouTube, has kind of changed. In other words, YouTube creators are all about getting clicks, and unless you're really passionate about security, talking about some of this stuff is kind of boring. It's only when you get to the offensive attacking stuff that it gets interesting. And so a lot of these creators have kind of abandoned their let's share the knowledge, and they're now, really going on the hacking and.
Well, I mean, defense is boring, building walls, checking compliance boxes, making sure the best practices are in place, but breaking into stuff, doing sneaky spy stuff. That's interesting. That's really what gets the clicks. And like you were talking about, I actually talked to a content creator at an event, and that was one of the things that he mentioned was that the blue team content, the defensive content, like how to set up your network properly, how to secure different avenues, different attack vectors, that stuff is boring. That just doesn't get the views that, how to compromise the latest firewall or how to, read your friends' messages on LinkedIn. Those are the kind of things that really get people's attention.
Blue team is defense, red team is attack. Generally, that's what we're...
Generally, and purple team is somewhere in the middle.
Mix between the two. Okay, that makes sense.
And there's every other flavor out there people have taken upon themselves to create.
Right. So I want to go back to that question I asked because I think I interrupted you, and I apologize, but I'm a new security officer. I just took over my organization. I do these workshops. I get a feel for it. I'm not obligated, but I get a report back like what you showed, kind of describing, hey, here are issues that need to be resolved or fixed. Where do I go from there?
From there, really, you could look at those, take those recommendations. You could go to whatever vendor you feel comfortable with and talk with them, to whatever technology partner. Work with them to develop a strategy around what's going to be the most cost-effective solution. Again, at targeting that risk mitigation, as well as not, exploding the CapEx for this year. Right. What can we get the CFO to approve to close some of these doors immediately, some of these doors that are flapping in the wind?
How many organizations, and again, I have not asked you this before, so I'm going to surprise you with a question, but how many of these organizations, in your experience, do the fix-it-yourself versus go to something like managed services for security? And is the trend moving one way or another? I don't know.
So I have definitely seen a trend moving more towards managed service providers. Definitely because a lot of times they just don't have the skill set on staff to develop and deploy these projects. They might not even have somebody on staff to architect these projects. It's a lot easier to get, especially even talking about local or the IT at the office, the customer's IT staff. It's a lot easier for them to be able to bring in somebody and turnkey, handle the security upgrades.
Yeah. I would love, as Fuji, I would love to, use our security operations center and provide managed services to customers, et cetera. One of the positives, though, of Checkpoint, which kind of goes against that, is you guys have been doing this longer than anyone. You have the largest name recognition. You've been out there forever. It's much, much easier to find engineers who already understand the Checkpoint ecosystem because you've been doing it for so long. Again, I would love to do it for companies, but one of the big positives that I keep reading from customers is, some of these other more smaller esoteric, not only do they not have the full suite of security available, but you can't find engineers that are really qualified and ready to go on this stuff. And that's not a problem, or not as much a problem with Checkpoint, just because you've been doing it for so long.
Absolutely, and we can definitely bring in professional services. We do professional services if that's an option that they'd like to explore. We can have that professional services conversation about doing something like that.
If we did a workshop, you gave us the high level of the workshop, but I really kind of want to get nuts and bolts of what's it going to be. I think you were talking about a lot of these, when you run these security assessments, you can actually do them remote. You can do them online, right?
We can, especially on the security operations review side. That tends to be a little bit lower impact. Well, I say low impact is not the right word because all of these are completely passive. They're not actually, going out and doing anything on your network. They're just looking at data. But it's a little bit less intensive, and we can absolutely do that fully remote, where we just, we deploy some of our assessment tools and collect that data and generate the report from there.
And obviously, to do that, you're going to have to put an agent or something on the network to
So it's multi-pronged. We kind of see it as three arenas out there. There's the email security, the cloud security, and then the actual on-prem network security. So we address those three different ways. With the on-prem network security, we can actually ship you a device that you're going to plug into a tap port or a mirror port on one of your switches, and that's just going to look at all the traffic. That's going to be able to make determinations on where we're seeing threats, where we're seeing problems, but it really gives us a good holistic view of all the traffic passing through your network for a specific period of time. On the cloud side, we use our CSPM tool. We go through there and onboard. That gives us full visibility into the environment. We see, cloud assets that you might not even know you had. But that, again, completely passive. We're in read-only mode within like AWS and GCP. So we're not touching anything. We're just looking. And then same with the email side. With the email side on SaaS, as long as it's SaaS email, unfortunately, we can't really do too much for on-prem Exchange. But assuming we're talking 365, G Suite, we can come in there and via APIs, we can hook in and get that detect-only mode to where we can just look at that email traffic, see what's being delivered to the customer, to the actual end user. And what's great about that is you leave all your current security solutions in place. So like with email security specifically, if you've got an email security gateway that's currently sitting out there inspecting traffic, we actually will sit behind that. And we will see only what is being delivered to the mailbox. So we're not messing with any of your security solution that's in place right now. We're just looking at what the end user is experiencing on the email end.
Right. Oh, that makes sense. So what actually gets through and gets delivered, et cetera.
Exactly.
Okay, that's fascinating. So let's say I'm interested in doing one of these. You mentioned two different, one was a full kind of 8-hour workshop, one was a 2-hour deal. I assume the 2-hour, when we're talking the complimentary review, that's the 2-hour, and then the 8-hour is more of a deeper engagement?
Correct.
Okay.
It's a security operations review is the light beer version.
Okay, got it. So what we recommend, and again, we've had customers do this, they go through that 2 hour, and then it gives you a really good idea or feel of where you are, what needs to be thought about. How often are they really surprised when that report comes back? In other words, how often do they see stuff that they just had no idea was even an issue?
So they, especially on the engineering side, I can speak to this, they know some of those skeletons that are in their closet, but the majority of the time they are shocked by at least one thing. One thing that's a higher severity issue that they didn't realize was in their environment. They always find something in their environment, but it might be one of those things like you were talking about that's a lower end compliance thing. Like the dumpster has to be 6 feet away from the door,
Right.
kind of minor things like that. But yeah, we pretty routinely will find at least one critical issue that the IT staff, the security staff had no idea was in their environment.
I was thinking about this. I still have a lot of good friends at Microsoft, and I was meeting one for lunch, and long story short, he blew out his knee actually trying to get to lunch. So we had to reschedule. And when he went to go have surgery on the knee, the doctors found a heart electrical issue. And he was, literally sent me an email and said, I need you to pray for me because this is a huge issue. And I was thinking about it in terms of security. I know that sounds crazy, but I was like, the problem that you know about and have diagnosed is so much better than the problem you don't, right? And not knowing is the real danger. Security is the same way, right? Don't stick your head in the sand and pretend the problem doesn't exist. Figure out where it is, and you can start, working on a plan to mitigate it. Whether you do it yourself or whether you use Fuji or whether you use Checkpoint or whatever the case may be, I think knowing is always better than not knowing, if that makes sense.
Well, and a lot of times it's an iceberg. Once the part you see peeking up at the top, that one minor security issue that is all of a sudden an operational issue, once you dive into that and really start looking at things, a lot of times it is much, much worse below the surface.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. We only have about 5 minutes left. We're coming to the end, and I just want to make sure you have, we talked about a ton of stuff, but I want to make you have a chance just to kind of summarize, and anything we haven't talked about that you want to bring up, now is probably a good time. Anything you would add or anything you'd want to mention?
No, other than I would definitely say that I'm with you. I don't understand why people don't utilize these security operations reviews and security workshops more. Like you said, they are totally free, no cost to you, no obligation. We're going to ship you out the equipment. You can do as much or as little as you would like. But it's really, it's like a free whole body scan. There's not a lot of benefits to passing it by.
Right. But I think too, a lot of companies that I talk to, like, oh, well, we just went through an audit 2 years ago or whatever. And I understand that, but at the same time, stuff's changing so fast. I was going to throw out just real quick some stories that you and I kind of discussed the other day. I think you knew some, or you didn't know some, and I didn't know some of yours. But two that come to mind. One is Home Depot, and I say this because it's been out, and you can actually read about it out on the internet. They set up a lawn and garden section so that you didn't have to go all the way back into the store to purchase lawn and garden stuff. You could just go to the outdoor deal. The register was there, et cetera. They never thought about the fact of how the data from the outdoor register went back inside the store. All the security was in the store, but the outside was not encrypted going back. And so an FBI agent working on his yard one weekend discovered these guys sitting in the front of a Home Depot with their laptops open, just intercepting traffic data back and forth. So my point behind this is, as we improve and we open up new opportunities, we also open up new vulnerabilities, and in that process, the whole thing, circles back around and becomes an issue again. And then the last one we were talking about, Dick Cheney, Vice President of the United States under the Bush administration, had a pacemaker, and no one ever thought to encrypt the signal to the pacemaker. which is a huge security issue. So again, same thing, as technology advances, even if you went through an audit a couple years ago, might behoove you to check in again, because new holes appear all the time, new threats.
Absolutely, and with the assessment tools that we're using, they are primarily reliant on our threat cloud, which is our always updated decision engine.
Oh, we didn't talk about that. That's actually a huge point, right? The fact that you have data points all over the globe, and if a threat pops up, those data points talk to each other and instantly update Am I saying that right? I'm not sure I'm telling that story correctly.
So what we're doing, we're feeding telemetry in from all the Checkpoint products. So it's 150,000 plus global networks are feeding data to us. So we are getting telemetry from those hardware firewalls, from our cloud security products, from our email security products, all across the globe. So we're getting a really good cross-section of what's going on out there in the world. When we detect a threat out there, when we detect a 0-day, something that is we determine to be malicious, that's new, we can push out protection to all of those products across our ecosystem.
What's the time from the time it's detected to the time the push happens?
2 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Is the time. Yeah, so we're doing. I think Google might have taken the lead again, but we were neck and neck with Google for a while in terms of queries done per day. It's up in the 8 billion range.
Wow, that is
8 billion queries per day to our threat cloud.
That's amazing.
But yeah, that's really what allows us to offer some better 0-day protection, because as soon as someone in Italy experiences that new 0-day threat, once we've determined it's malicious, us here, someone in Japan, all those people instantly are protected.
Yeah.
We can push out that protection.
I'm looking at my watch and we're actually out of time, so I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank you, Matt. This was a great discussion. I appreciate it. I hope everyone got some good information. I'm going to be doing some follow-up with Matt. We're going to send you all we're not going to spam you, but we are going to send you a follow-up that says, look, if you want to try one of these free assessments, no obligation, complimentary assessment, no obligation whatsoever. We'll just have a discussion. We'll have a talk. You'll have a good idea of where you're standing. If you do need additional help, we're there and capable of doing that. And if you're all secure and everything's great, then, absolute, God bless, and I'm glad to know that is the case. I will also send that white paper that kind of talks about why we decided to pick Checkpoint over all the security companies in the world. And again, this was a year-long decision. We really spent some time testing and doing that. I'll share that as well. And you have my information. You have Matt as well. If you have questions or things you didn't get to ask or whatever, please send them to me. I'll follow up directly with every person who sends me a response. I'll be glad to do that for you. So with that, again, Matt, I appreciate it so much for taking the time to educate us on Checkpoint and what's going on security. And I thank everyone for joining. Any last thoughts before we close it out?
It's always great talking to you. Last time we chatted, my wife was like, what got you so wound up? So you get me going. I always appreciate talking to you, sir.
Well, I appreciate it as well. Thanks so much. And hopefully, we're starting to think about next year. So we're going to probably do more training, more webinars, always free, just trying to educate people as much as possible. We'll make sure Checkpoint's a huge part of that. So thanks, everyone. We appreciate it. Yep. And we'll see you on another future Fuji webinar. Bye-bye, everybody.